This is where Disneyland's missing river once ran. But even though Disney removed the water, the river still runs today. And if you understand how the river runs, then you understand the challenges that Disney faces if they ever want to edit this corner of the park. A piece of land stuck between Tomorrowland and Fantasyland that hasn't been altered in over 30 years, but is now currently the home to 2 dead attractions. Brickey here, breaking down Disneyland's missing river and why this is one of the most difficult things Disney will have to figure out if they ever want this area to change. If you love studying Disneyland's past so we can better predict its future, make sure you subscribe to the channel and let me show you how you can still spot it today. This is where it all began, right here. Today, sitting quietly between It's a Small World and the Matterhorn is a little garden that people walk past every single day, probably not aware of how important this is to Disneyland's past, but also to its future. This wasn't always the most quiet spot inside of Disneyland. Let me explain. Because this was once not 1, but 2 loading and unloading docks for the motorboat cruise. You see, guests would line up on this side of the dock and over on this side where they would begin and end 2 different journeys, where small, little gas-powered and loud boats around Disneyland's Lost River. And if you look closely at the concrete, there is still evidence of what once resided here. Faint outlines inside the concrete shows where the different docks used to connect to where we're standing. You see, the boats pulled up out there. This was how you got to the docks. And these little spots in the ground is how it all connected. Today, this spot has been softened up, landscaped, and renamed Fantasia Gardens. And that was once a whole different attraction. Make sure you watch this video later to learn about what Disneyland almost built here, almost built at the Magic Kingdom, and eventually built it right across from Epcot. That was all planned for right here. But strangely, even though the river has gone away, this hasn't been erased. It's a quiet clue, but one that asks a very curious question. If Disneyland really wanted this ride forgotten, why did they leave this part behind? Because as you'll learn in today's video, this isn't the only piece of the river that's still hiding in plain sight. You just have to know where to look, and today we're gonna look at all those locations. In 1957, Disneyland was still figuring itself out. Tomorrowland had already gone through a few quick pivots, and the Phantom boats were gone. And what they left behind was a big basin of water just sitting here. But Walt, he didn't waste space and he didn't waste money. In that year, Walt would add lots of quick fixes to Disneyland to keep up with its rising popularity. And along with the Skyway, one of those additions was the motorboat cruise. It was cheap, it was charming, and it gave guests one more way to explore Disneyland's growing Tomorrowland. I love it. I got one wave. That's pretty good. You see, the new ride turned a leftover body of water into a new scenic river, winding its way around different versions of Utopia and under the Viewliner Bridge, Train of the Future. Check out this video if you want to learn more about that attraction. But most importantly, it added something that Walt Disney loved and in return taught all of us to love as well. It added kinetic energy, story told through scenery. And most importantly, it bought Disneyland time because this water wasn't going anywhere. And Walt knew he couldn't remove it. And 7 decades later, they still have it. And here's why. If you were loaded on the motorboat cruise from the west side of the dock, this is where your journey began down what I've named the North River. And the wild part is, the water still flows here today. You can see it doing it right over my shoulder. But the water no longer flows for boats or guests. It flows because it has to. You see, Disneyland's original water features are all part of something called the Dark Water System, a connective loop that starts at the rivers of America and pumps up to Storybook Land, flows across the journey that we just took across the street, comes over to the motorboat cruise, works its way over to Sleeping Beauty Castle, ends up flowing to Adventureland, and then back at the Rivers of America where this journey starts and stops. So friends, this wasn't just a decorative river, this is part of the park's original plumbing, but not that kind of plumbing. Don't worry about that. It's turd free, I guarantee you. Oh, from humans, lots of birds in there. And if you know where to look, you can still see the system in action today. It's treated, gone through a filtration system, and works its way to this location right here. Almost tripped. But as we look around here, you notice there's more than one river. There's several options that are coming off of what now stands today in Fantasia Gardens. This always confused me, but now I know why. If you were loaded onto the motorboat cruise from the east side of this dock, you went straight to the other side of this little peninsula, but not the path in the middle. We'll get to that in a minute. You went over to the far right, which I refer to as the South River. And today, you can still see it. It's hidden by landscaping, but it's still there if you know where to look. This was the less documented half of the motorboat cruise, not because it was unimportant, but because it was tucked out of sight, harder to see, harder to film. So most footage that you'll see will always be over on the west side, where you'll see people take the path to the North River. West side? But this is the part that always confused me. There were two rivers, three entry points, but both journeys started at the same dock, and they both looped around Utopia. But we all know there's no way that the tracks can ever cross one another. I mean, these are tracks underwater with boats attached to them. You can't do a crossing. So how did Disney pull that off? And what was the overall design story they were trying to tell with two loops instead of one giant loop? Well, to figure that out, we'll have to keep walking because the clues are still here, hidden under your tires. Right here is where it all started to come together. Land and water, drivers and boaters, stacked on top of one another. This small, quiet bridge still stands today, but back when the motorboat cruise was running, this spot was alive with motion. You see, above, Utopia. Below, 4 lanes of boat traffic. 2 coming and going from the North River, and 2 coming and going from the South River. But with this first bridge, you got to see the boats in different sections, gliding gently beneath your bridge. And it's one of those classic Disneyland illusions. Everything feels calm and peaceful until you realize how many moving parts are overlapping in one quiet corner of the park. And this is the part that's fascinating to me, because if this bridge still exists, then that means the riverbed does too. The water may be gone, but the shape of the land, the way it dips here, the way it curves around the bend, that's all still here, waiting just to be noticed. When you look at this from above using Google Earth, this is where you can start to see the dirt path that's etched into the soil. Clearly indicates what was once a river. We're just getting started, because what comes next is where the scale really starts to change. This is the big one. This is the main bridge. This bridge stands right about where the view liner once crossed over the motorboat cruise, illustrating that this river was here before so many attractions, and the banks are here long after others. A lot of what was happening right in this little corner of the park, this is Walt Disney's design philosophy in action. Story told through motion. And a little thing that we all love, kinetic energy. Let's follow the water downstream to the busiest and most forgotten stretch of the missing river, possibly the greatest example ever of Disney's kinetic energy, where a record number of attractions all came together. This record has never been beaten since. This area I have dubbed the marina turnaround. This is where the boats would slowly circle in a giant turnaround. And because of their design, Their placement looked very random, like a marina full of tiny little boats steered by little folks with big dreams. It gave guests a calm little moment to look around, but what they saw was anything but calms. This spot right here was buzzing with motion. Above them, the monorail zipped by, the people mover cruised overhead, Autopia cars were right on your horizon, and right below it all, gliding through the river, surrounded by layers of kinetic energy and movement. It was a stage. Every guest on every vehicle was part of the scene. You weren't just watching the show, you were also in it. This was Walt's idea of kinetic energy storytelling turned all the way up. And somehow, in the chaos, it all moved in Disneyland harmony. You don't get many corners of Disneyland like this anymore. Not this dense, not this alive. And the wild part is, even though most of those attractions are gone, the shape still exists. And the corner still has its curves, the riverbed still holds its form, because without water, the land still remembers. And Disney still remembers a lesson they learned the hard way. When you put it all together, at some point, you gotta take it all apart. And that's a big reason for the pause, but not the only reason. This wasn't just the back end of the motorboat cruise. That car sounds like shit. The dividing line between two different Disneylands. This concrete wall is a seawall, still standing today, and it used to separate the motorboat cruise from the submarine voyage. Two very different attractions, two different storylines, and two completely different worlds, all stitched together by little race cars. Because Disney didn't want you to see the division, they used a clever trick. They built an Autopia bridge to stitch it all together. You see, back then and still today, guests drive tiny cars unknowingly cross this bridge. And in doing so, you stitch together fantasy with the future. Above you, a continuous highway, but below you, two different worlds separated by one seawall. And because of this clever layering, the motion and the sound, it all felt like one massive lagoon. But the submarines show up in 1959, and so does something else. Disneyland's clear water system, not the dark water. This side, dark, murky, dyed water hiding tracks, but on this side, clear, filtered water for storytelling. It was seamless and a perfect illusion. And again, because this is also a story about infrastructure, that seawall still exists, even though the boats and the river have gone away. And it'll stay here for a long time, because Disneyland doesn't just build sets, it builds systems. And even when the story goes away, the system has to stay. And now we're about to reach the final curve of the riverbed, where all the clues come together and we finally find out what happened when the story and the river disappeared. But why some of the water is still here today, over 3 decades later. You see, in 1993, the motorboat cruise quietly took its last lap. Disneyland was building Toontown just a few hundred yards away, and someone somewhere had to make the math work. And it was determined the motorboat cruise didn't fit into the future. It wasn't fast, it wasn't flashy, and when they rethemed it, it didn't really change much. It just didn't scream progress for a park that was finally ready to start again, moving forward. So the accountants made the call, and the operating budget from here was moved over to Toontown, reassigned, its story erased. The water was drained, the boats were removed, and just like that, the motorboat cruise that was at Disneyland for 4 decades was over. And this is the part that nobody talks about. Because even though the river went away, its original reason for being here didn't, and it won't, it can't. This is a major part of original 1955 Walt Disney Disneyland. You can take out the river, but you can't take out the reason. So to this day, the river still does flow, but not for guests and not for fun, but because Disneyland needs it to. And if the water's still here, then maybe the story never left. So now let's make sense of this small tucked away corner It's the last real piece of the missing river. A small, sleepy lagoon, but it's doing a lot more than what it looks like, because this little body of water, you can do it, you got this, is still part of the original dark water system, where water flows in from Storybook Land and it settles here for a while. Told you could do it. And from here, it makes its way to a quiet tunnel that goes somewhere either under or right next to the Matterhorn, onward to the Castle Moat, Jungle Cruise, and eventually Rivers of America, like I explained earlier. But you really need to revisit this idea and to think about how hard it would be to alter this. Because friends, this isn't just nostalgia, this is infrastructure. And you can't drain this lagoon without breaking the entire circle. So it bears repeating twice just to wrap your mind around how important this is to the overall dynamic of the original waterways of Disneyland. This leftover piece of the pass is still working, it's still flowing, and it's 100% shaping the future of what comes next. Because when the day finally comes to build something new here, Disney is going to have to work with the water, because it is not going anywhere without a tremendous amount of effort and expense. Two things modern Disney hates. So if Disneyland decides to build something new here one day, they just can't dig and pour concrete. They'll have to work with this invisible waterway, which lends me to believe that eventually we'll see an extension of Fantasyland over here, where this water will go around either the Castle of Arendelle or maybe Beauty and the Beast. Because it would be very dangerous to risk building something over the top of a now 7-decade-old water system, and with 1955 technology. So as the way I see it, the only way to fully drain it and to fully remove it might mean the removal or serious editing of the Matterhorn, because digging under it would only add to the structural problems that the Matterhorn is currently facing. I don't think that's an option. The mountain is struggling to stay alive on its own. Adding in to getting underneath there and rerouting water, probably not going to happen. Because when this was built, this was just a mound of dirt, and it would probably have to go back to something similar to that to edit everything here. Disneyland is a park and place of change, but sometimes that change gets very complicated, because you can repaint the walls, you can re-theme the attractions, but when the pipes under your park are still original, there's only so much you can erase. To see how this whole system works and what connects this forgotten river to nearly every corner of the park, watch this video next about Disneyland's dark water system. Thank you so much for showing up. I appreciate you. I'll see you next Saturday, or daily over at the Brickey Vlog.